Welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of Education, a clusterfuck in need of improvement. This episode is entitled The Inconvenience of the Human. I think the title is self-explanatory. Before we start, I'd like to emphasize that all ideas presented in this podcast are my own and do not reflect the thoughts, opinions, or positions of my employer, Emerson College, its programs, or its representatives. People, they're so inconvenient. You know what I'm talking about, right? They need things. They want things. They have feelings. We have some skills to bring to this. Skills that are desperately needed now. Needed by our students, by their parents, by our communities. We are a place where the inconvenience that is people is not undermining our every effort. People, they're so inconvenient. You know what I'm talking about, right? They need things. They want things. They have feelings. Lots of feelings. Fear, love, anger, joy. Well, joy is in short supply right now. Don't invest in the joy commodities market unless you like it uncertain. Contentment, rage, and on and on. And those feelings lead to actions. Acts of kindness, acts of cruelty, acts of self-sacrifice, and acts of selfishness. And on and on. And they're hard to predict. So hard. Look at Minneapolis, for example, where an action group showed up at a building site to protect 2 immigrants from arrest by ICE. Those people should have been cowering in fear, or at least turning a blind eye. They should have been letting 2 immigrants, cornered on the top of a building by ICE agents in 20 degrees below zero weather, freeze, instead of taking action, handing up blankets and thermoses of coffee, creating a human chain that allowed one of the men to escape. Who could have called that? Those agents had guns. That wind was dangerously cold. They risked their lives. And as we'd find out a few weeks later, when another brave Minnesotan was killed in her car for, what? Getting in the way? Preventing an ICE kidnapping? We may never know. Certainly nothing death-worthy. But as I said, people. They're so inconvenient and so unpredictable. Well, that's feelings for you. You just never know in what direction they'll steer the ship. Into the open water, the path of least resistance, or straight towards that looming iceberg. Back to the Titanic metaphor, I hear you grumble. That's so Season 1. You're right, of course. But this time, it's not education that's headed for the iceberg. It's society itself. Society headed toward the iceberg of imperialism, of totalitarianism, of economic inequity, and the heartless victimization of anyone who objects, particularly anyone of color. And this time, education is just another passenger along for the ride. We're not up in that wheelhouse. We're not steering the ship. We're helpless observers of epic wrongs. Right? Now you think I'm going to say wrong, but I'm not, because this is Season 2. Gone are the naive halcyon days of Season 1. My hippie clothes are in the closet, waiting for the return of kinder times, and my Elizabeth Gurley Flynn change or die outfit is back in play. Look her up. Because we are observers here. And the systematic manipulation of the current administration is largely beyond our direct control. Ooh, here we go, I hear you say. Yep, here we fucking go. But the thing about inconvenient people, about the impact of feelings on the expectations of systems, that is in our wheelhouse. Because as teachers, we deal with the most unpredictable, challenging, chaotic feelings there are. The feelings of children and young people in large groups. Children we're charged with educating. We know how to do that. That isn't the scary unknown for most teachers. Teachers have to deal with that before we can teach kids anything, right? Yes, right. So we have a leg up on the current situation. Though the feelings of students, particularly students in areas with substantial immigrant populations, are at a scary peak right now. Constant fear and uncertainty will do that to you. Will I make it home from the store, from church, from school? Will my parents make it home? Is anyone safe? A brief detour. I have a friend who teaches in an urban school with a huge immigrant population. About 84% of the school is Hispanic. Students in this high school are so afraid to leave their homes that for the first time, her class size is reasonable, down to 19 or 20 students from 30 to 35 students. Is this a positive? Actually, no, because the rest of the students live in fear and trauma, which inhibits their ability to learn. But I digress. So, we have some skills to bring to this. Skills that are desperately needed now. Needed by our students, by their parents, by our communities. We are a place where the inconvenience that is people is not undermining our every effort, though it makes it harder. Harder to deal with the day-to-day challenges. Harder to watch children crumble under the fear that society is requiring them to carry. And most difficult, harder to deal with the compassion we feel towards their helplessness and to deal with our own. But we have some automaticity in dealing with these things. I think it helps. Because what's the option? Throwing up our hands in defeat? Quitting this impossible job? A lot of teachers have. According to current data, in 2025, teacher shortages have reached crisis levels, leaving over 400,000 classrooms without a certified educator or filled by someone underqualified. Apparently, teachers are also people who are inconvenient. According to that same study, quote, reading and math scores are at their lowest levels in decades. Chronic absenteeism is rising. I wonder if there's any connection there. Probably not. And teachers, with their inconvenient feelings, cite feeling unappreciated. Education Week quotes a middle school teacher from North Dakota, quote, teachers are overworked, underpaid, and disrespected. We deal with our most valuable part of our society, which is children. We're treated as if that does not matter, unquote. The Pew Research Center quotes a high school teacher who said, quote, the public attitudes toward teachers have been degrading, and it is making it impossible for well-qualified teachers to be found. People are simply not wanting to go into a profession because of public sentiments, unquote. Pew found that even elementary teachers are feeling the disrespect. Quote, we feel undervalued. The public and many parents of my students treat me and my peers as if we do not know as much as they do, as if we are uneducated, end quote. Society so wants to discount the impact we have on other people and the impact they have on us. Our respect or lack of respect for teachers should have no impact on their retention as long as we pay them. And if we're found to be paying them insufficiently, we don't increase the pay, we undermine their merit, so additional pay is not required. So teachers who complain about the hours required to do their job, as this high school teacher quoted in Pew Research does, quote, the amount of extra hours that teachers have to put in beyond the contractual time is ridiculous. Arriving 30 minutes before and leaving an hour after is just the tip of the iceberg. And as far as having summers off, most of August is taken up with preparing materials for the upcoming school year or attending 3, 4, 7 days worth of unpaid development training, unquote. These teachers are characterized as whiners, unmotivated, slackers. And teachers who correctly identify the uptick in mental health issues in students, as this social studies teacher in Minnesota does, quote, time is always an issue and it has gotten worse. Anxiety is very high and a variety of other student mental health issues where you might in the past have had 30 to 35 students, you might have had 1 or 2 students with these issues. Now you'll have 4 or 5, unquote. Well, they just don't care enough. But we know how those Minnesotans are, rule breakers. So inconvenient. A brief detour, but it runs right alongside of this discussion, sort of the frontage road to people are inconvenient drive. I was listening to NPR, and there was a segment on the state of test scores in this country. They were talking about No Child Left Behind and whether abandoning the standardized testing and draconian consequences of that policy were negatively affecting student test scores now. Not student learning, but student test scores. There was a brief nod to the negative consequences of, teaching to the test and a longer tut-tut over teachers finding ways to cheat. Can you imagine? Just to save their jobs, just to help students get a diploma. They didn't say that last bit. That's pure me. Too human a consideration. But there was no discussion at all about the human consequences of that educational pressure cooker. Nothing about the uptick in anxiety and depression in children as young as 8. Nothing about the federal government getting rid of No Child Left Behind because it was collapsing under its own financial weight and its widespread failure. Nothing about people unable to get jobs without a high school diploma due to failure to pass the 10th grade test, so straining the social safety nets of states with high failure rates that the solution became to allow states to give them a diploma if they had the credits to deserve it, which states did in the tens of thousands. Nothing. The lack of detail was horrifying. No Child Left Behind ended about 10 years ago. There's plenty of information available about it. But hey, talking about people is so inconvenient. It's much more convenient to talk policy, data, test scores. Fuck my life. I yelled at the radio like a crazy person. And while I'm ranting, within an hour of that broadcast, I read this headline. Quote, EPA to stop considering lives saved when setting rules on air pollution. Quote, in a reversal, the agency plans to calculate only the cost to industry when setting pollution limits and not the monetary value of saving human lives, documents show. Because people are so inconvenient. The whole breathing, health, quality of life, Megillah, needy, needy, needy. Again, fuck my life. But let's careen back onto the main road, shall we? Okay, so society promotes the idea that the capitalist business model is the human model, that time is money, effort is rewarded by money, and ergo, that's what people care about. So concerning ourselves with what happens in schools as anything but completely transactional, with teachers and students as anything more than the generators of data, would acknowledge the inconvenience of the humans in the environment. Humans with needs, wants, and desires that impact those outcomes, that data. So schools and school systems tend to respond punitively, increasing requirements for proving one's worth rather than responding to the needs of the inconvenient people in the space. And as teachers are driven out of the profession by these dynamics, the consistency of leadership that is the number one factor encouraging students to stay in school is disrupted again and again. Oh, another detour, and not frontage road this time. This is more of a meandering local road, a picturesque alternative to 65 miles an hour on the main drag. Okay. My daughter worked at a small local coffee shop. The workers there, who are earning maybe $1 an hour above minimum wage, had a very strong sense of community. They covered for each other's absences, sent each other home sick, and created a warm, positive environment for the clientele. They were in relationship with many members of the local community who came for coffee and snacks regularly, sometimes several times a day. Then the shop was purchased by a new owner who felt that the relationship among workers and between workers and customers was less important than promptness of service. The resulting tensions caused the employees to quit one by one, and the loss of their friendly faces caused many of the regulars to switch to other coffee shops. My daughter was not surprised. She said, "Why should they make the effort to come there? There's no one to show up for. Nobody cares if you're there or not." I'm not sure anyone would debate the wisdom of that sentiment, and that's a coffee shop. If the coffee is subpar, who cares? If it's great, that's a bonus. But the importance of who serves it is central to the success of the endeavor. Yet in schools, we want to pretend that doesn't matter, because after all, we pay people to be there. but they quit anyway. And the students stop showing up too, either literally or metaphorically. People, they're so inconvenient. But back to education. Could you hear the squealing of tires on that shift? Sorry, you should be wearing your seatbelt. But more specifically, the Federal Department of Education. After an early burst of bombastic threats by the current administration regarding the department and its uselessness, recently discussion of the Department of Education and its future has been put on the back burner as we focus on Venezuela and Greenland. Maybe if it was a sexier topic, it too could serve to distract from the Epstein files. Well, maybe next time. And while I'm bumming you out, a few facts about the Department of Education, some of which might actually cheer you up. I know that seems unlikely, but you never know. The current administration threatened to eliminate the Department of Ed, justifying its decision by citing recent declines in National Assessment of Educational Progress, that's NAEP, report card scores, in spite of $190 billion in COVID relief funds provided to state and local school districts. During COVID, I might add. This rationale overlooks persistent challenges in the public education system, including the federal government's declining financial support over the past 20 years. Never mind the complicating factors of COVID on child mental health, readiness to learn, etc. That's just the human factor. Way too messy to consider or report on. This is a dollar to outcome dynamic. If money is spent, it should work. Capitalism, the ultimate wisdom. But it turns out that a federal agency can't be eliminated without congressional approval. So instead it was reduced. It was already the smallest cabinet-level agency, but it now has only 2,000 employees, responsible for overseeing the education of more than 50 million school-aged children and 18.4 million students in post-secondary education. They also slashed billions from school budgets and eliminated guidance for special education, ELL programs, and compliance oversight. Wow, what a savings. What could possibly go wrong? Well, for one thing, the reduction in people means that there aren't enough staff to oversee the accountability systems, including timely data reporting and oversight of efforts to improve academic outcomes and close achievement gaps, that's mandated in the Every Student Succeeds Act. What can we do? How can we support success here? The answer? Secretary of Education Linda McMahon has encouraged states to submit waivers to avoid federal accountability requirements under ESSA. Problem solved. The reduction in people also weakened the Office for Civil Rights, the OCR, which enforces civil rights laws in public schools to help protect students from discrimination. People and systems can still report incidents of harassment, discrimination, and hate, but there's growing concern about the OCR's capacity to investigate and resolve complaints. Why? Because that agency lost 7 of its 12 regional offices and nearly 180 staff attorneys. Problem? Well, ignored. This isn't the sort of good news I mentioned earlier. So now what might fall under the umbrella of better news? 1. Something I didn't know until researching this. Only about 10% of funding for public education flows through Washington. It's mostly directed toward low-income and disabled students, and Trump can't withhold that money. The government distributes it according to formulas set by Congress. 2. While Trump wants to use the department to oppose DEI efforts, he also says parents and local governments should fully control education policy. This opens the door to real control by more education knowledgeable people who have the needs and best interests of children and teachers in mind. And under the Every Student Succeeds Act, there's a lot of flexibility regarding how states measure outcomes. Authentic assessment is an option rather than high-stakes standardized tests. 3. Students are unlikely to feel much immediate impact. That's because state and local school districts already make their own decisions about reading lists, curriculum, teacher pay, testing policies, and student discipline practices. Bad news, ineffective systems can stay ineffective if they want to without pressure to improve from the federal government. Good news, good systems and excellent systems can stay good without interference from the federal government. And back to my season 1 treatise on controlling the narrative, the financial power of communities is still in play. Public education impacts real estate prices, make a community appealing to businesses who feed the tax base and improve all town and city services, and so on. Parents and voters of all kinds can push for the schools they want without having to navigate federal statutes. That's not nothing. And along those lines, the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Elementary and Secondary Education recently sent a letter to all chief state school officers reminding them that they can apply for authority under the Education Flexibility Partnership Act of 1999, the EdFlex Act. This allows states with EdFlex authority to waive certain federal requirements that apply to districts and schools without first having to submit waivers to the department for review and approval, allowing school districts to focus on improving learning outcomes and better serve the needs of the local community. Could this go horribly wrong? Sure. Could it also go very right? Yes. There's a lot more to discuss about this, but the bile is rising in my throat as I think about all the horrors of today. You can look up more info if you want it. As I said earlier, education isn't the current focus of administrative animus. Though there has been a noticeable uptick this week in postings about how our schools should be doing better than they are and blaming, well, everyone except federal policy. Because it's not policy that's to blame. It's the people. So, lots of challenges. The elimination of the inconvenient person from much of the reporting and discussion on education. Where do we go from here? We go back to our classrooms. We go back to the thing we know how to do, to educate, to make people who will contribute to society, who will understand the dynamics at play, dynamics of inequity, greed, corruption, imperialism, and fight against them, to make people who will be as thoughtful, as courageous, as loving, as stubborn, and as inconvenient as we are. We advocate as loudly and often as we feel we can, because that's not helpless, or useless, or sad, or pathetic, or inconsequential. That's powerful and brave. That's how the world changes. I plan to be there, in my Elizabeth Gurley Flynn outfit, standing up for what I think is right. I hope I see you there. A friend of mine recently told me that he believes that theater is the site of connection and empathy development in schools. I believe that to be true, not just of theater, though I'm biased in that direction, of course, but of a lot of teaching in any number of subjects. I want to leave you with a new magnet I got this year. Yes, I have a problem. I'm working on it. It's an image of a winter landscape and a covered bridge at dusk. It says, "Under the arch of the heavens we find our way." And in this dark moment, we can find our way. Together, with our students, with like-minded others. Even if it's hard to see it in the dark, we can still feel the way. If you would like to share some moments of survival in the current climate, I would love to hear them. You can DM me in my Instagram account, educationclusterf_CK, or email it to me at educationclusterfck@gmail.com, and I'll share them in the next episode. I'll leave out your name if you prefer. If you can't, I get that. No hard feelings, hang in there. As always, thank you for listening. If you have time, please post a review or share this with someone you think it would be useful for. I'll talk at you in about 2 weeks.
J like the letter, I'm making several waves. I know the mission is same. I made a splash, now all of my passes last like running a race with Usain. I keep it coming like this a buffet. And if I'm stumbling, I'm in the grave. Never gon' fumble it, I get the bag and I run with it, gunning it, gunning it, gunning it, gunning it.